Well, good morning. Well, thank you. I needed that. It's been great being here for the whole week and getting to know so many new people and hanging out with young people particularly. And even though I've enjoyed my time, I do sometimes look forward to going home too. Not that it's because I don't like you guys. It's just that my wife sits at home and she's having to take care of everything while I'm out traveling around the world. And once in a blue moon, she gets to come. But anyway, I like to always acknowledge her role in my ministry. She speaks as well. She's very, very talented speaker, and she, speaks a lot on hospitality and interacting with lost people and that kind of a thing. But anyways, she stays at home and holds the fort while I'm gone, and then, all the questions that come along about business or whatever, where she doesn't have a clue, she's having to try to field those and write them down so that when I phone home, which I tend to not do that often, then she, tries to say, well, what about this? What about that? Somebody phoned about this or whatever, and I just try to say, well, let it go until I get home. Anyways, be heading home next couple days here, and but we'll be missing this country. I love your country. I love everything about it, and I'd like to bring my wife back down here sometime just for a real visit and enjoy the place. What I want to talk about today, I was thinking about this morning, is what happens when bad things happen to you. I mean, we know what happens, but why do bad things happen to you sometimes? And I'm pretty sure that everybody in this tent has had traumatic things happen to them to the level of they're wondering how they'll get through it. Because, God never promised us a rose garden here. A lot of the evangelists out there say so, especially the prosperity evangelists. Oh, just give yourself to God, and by the way, give me the money, and everything's going to be great for you. I've been collecting unbelievably haywire appeals by different evangelists, and other people get this stuff sent to them, like Peter Poff and guys like that. And it just so blows me away that anybody could suck for some of this stuff that I actually keep these things. And, like you take a little tissue paper and they give you a little plastic thing with some blue oil in it, and you make sure that you put one drop on 5 different tissue papers, and it has to be exactly 5 minutes on the foot of your bed, and then it's 12 and a half minutes on the door of your house, and you got to go through all this stuff, and then you send a check for $36 along with your little pieces of paper. And because they've got anointing there wherever this is going, prosperity will be yours. And that's just one of them. I just happened to be looking at my backpack while I was here the other night, and I'm just like, who actually believes this stuff? Because the way it really is this. Like I said, God doesn't promise you a rose garden. In fact, I can guarantee you're going to have some heavy stuff hit you when you give yourself over to Jesus. But God never lets you be beat up beyond the power he gives you to withstand it. And he's always given you encouragement. So whenever bad things happen, don't let go of him. Paul, if we look here in 2 Corinthians 11, this guy was beat up big time. Yeah, he used to beat up other people. So Paul was rough on the other Christians, persecuting him, even putting him to death. He stood there when Stephen was stoned to death. Here's what it says in 2 Corinthians 11, for the start of verse 23. He's talking about everything he's been through, and this isn't even the full list, because you go to Acts and you can find other things that he's been through. In stripes above measure, in prison more frequent, in deaths often. Of the Jews, 5 times received I 40 stripes, save one. That's a beating. He's an adult. 40 stripes, 40 hits with something that's meant to lay your back open. And that's 5 times by the Jews. Thrice I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day have I been in the deep. In journeyings often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils of mine own countrymen, in perils by the heathen, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness. It just goes on and on the list that Paul went through. And guess what? He's a great evangelist. Why would God allow all this stuff? And then, if that isn't enough, we go over to 2 Corinthians 12, verse 10. It says this. Therefore, this is after he gives this big summary of all the bad things he's encountered. Therefore, I take pleasure. It's got to be the wrong word, right? No, this is what he says. I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Okay, so here we have Paul, who's a great evangelist. If anything, he should have all the protection in the world. But he's got all this stuff going on. But for some reason, he can say, I take joy in this adversity. How can you take joy in bad things? Well, I've had a life full of bad things hit me now and then. And years ago, you just had no idea how you'd ever get through some of the things that I've been hit with in my life. But then you do get through. And if you're honest and you look back and you say, why did I have to go through that? I'm getting pretty good now to realize that this was good for me to go through tough times. And when we read the Bible and it talks about the tough times, that you will be persecuted, not that God wants you to persecute, but remember, when you give yourself over to God, the devil's going to be there to try to discourage you. But what I'm trying to get through in this talk here is he will never have the ability to push you beyond what God has given you the strength to withstand. That I know for a fact from experience. If you go to Matthew, let's go to Matthew 10. Because if we give ourselves over to Jesus, we're going to be given a commission. And that commission is to go out into the world to finish this gospel. This gospel will be preached. Didn't say it might be preached, it will be preached. So if you look at this here, in Matthew 10, verse 16, it says, Jesus to us, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Does that sound like something fun? I mean, I've been around wolves. In Canada, we have a lot of wolves. I've done a lot of camping out in the wilderness and stuff, and there has been times where I'm way, way out in the wilderness, way away from any vehicle or anybody, and in the middle of the night with the snow all around, you hear the wolves cutting loose and starting to howl. It's a very lonely sounding thing, and it could be scary, except I've spent so many years of my life in the bush with wolves around. It doesn't worry me. But I do know this much. A wolf with a lamb, there isn't anything left of the lamb, because some of the places I go in northern British Columbia, the farmers are shooting wolves anytime they see them. They're shooting them because they're killing their cattle. And unfortunately with wolves, what they do a lot of times, even if they're not hungry, they'll chase down a cow and tear its tendons out on the back legs so it can't even walk, and then leave them. So they're kind of gnarly little beasts. So when it says here, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves, it sounds like a ridiculous commission that we're given. Why would I want to be a sheep out in the middle of wolves? I should be fearful if this is what God's desire is for me. But that carries on. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Then it continues, and here's what's interesting. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in their synagogues. So God's saying, I'm going to send you forth as sheep amongst wolves. Sounds bad. Then he goes on to tell us, your biggest worry isn't going to be the wolves out there. You know where the biggest worry is? They're going to scourge you in their synagogues. So in other words, God is saying, don't worry about those wolves. They're nothing. They're powerless over you. I'm going to tell you where your biggest rash is going to come from. It's going to come from people in the church seeing you out there amongst wolves. Because I know what it's like. You go out in the world and you're hanging around people and other people happen to see you. Oh, because you went to a pub to have a business meeting where I'm in their comfort zone. I didn't drink. But because I'm there, the story goes, he was in a pub. Yeah? Okay, guess what? I would rather be in the company of the people out in the world where they're most comfortable, not where I'm most comfortable. But when you go out there, look out. The people inside are going to say, just like they did with Jesus, was Jesus a drinker? No, but guess what the Jews said about him? You gluttonous winebibber. Did he drink? Did he lower your standards? No. He just happened to be hanging around with all the wrong people, according to the religious people, so that's where his biggest chaff came from. So the point is this. I'll guarantee if you haven't, young people especially, if you haven't already been hit with something bad, maybe it's a relationship breakdown in a family or whatever else, you're going to be. But take heart, because I can speak from experience getting hit hard many times in my life to the point where if I didn't have God, I would have folded. A few years ago, I was on my way down to California, and I told you the first night I might tell this story, but I decided maybe this today I will. I was on my way to California to speak in a men's group. Guys flying in from all over the U.S., and I got to speak 5 times over the weekend. So I get up early. I'm at the border, the Canadian-U.S. border, at 6 a.m. because I got a 2-hour and 45-minute drive to the Seattle airport because it gets me quicker to California if I go through Seattle than if I go through my own airport in Vancouver, British Columbia. So I'm at the border at 6 a.m. No traffic at 6. Who cares? And so I hit the border, and I hand him my passport. I do this all the time. I mean, multiple times a month, and every week at least I'm down, whether it's ministry or business or whatever else. So I'm there at 6 a.m., and the guy is looking at me funny and looking down, looking at me. He says, "Sir, I would like you to get out of your truck, pickup truck." In the middle of this queue, like in other words, other people are going to be coming. They weren't right behind me at that moment. He says, "Get out of your truck." So he comes out of his little shack there. You know, it's like ready to do a quick draw. His hands over his gun and everything. I'm thinking, well, whatever. So I get out of the truck, and he says, "Okay, leave the door open," whatever. So I go around the truck, and all of a sudden a bunch of other guys come out, and they escort me in. In other words, I'm surrounded by Border Patrol guys all packing heat. And so I go inside, and everybody's gathered on the computer, and they're looking at me, and they're looking at the computer and at me. And then the guy says, "What are you doing down here?" And I says, "Well, because I'm a U.S. citizen as well, so I flash a U.S. passport." And so then he's asking me what I'm doing. I told him I'm just on my way to the airport to fly down to speak at a men's retreat. Yeah, they don't care. And then so asked me a few more questions. He says, "What's your social security number?" Like that's a work number in the U.S., which I don't use because I live in Canada. I don't even know what it is. I know I've got one written somewhere on a folder somewhere. And so I said, "Well, I don't know what it is." He says, "So you don't know what it is?" I says, "No, just told you I don't know what it is." So then he says, he goes into the supervisor's office, comes back out. "So what is your social security number?" I said, I don't know. I don't work in the States. Yeah, I go down and consult and stuff, but I don't know what it is. "So you don't know what it is?" "No, I don't know what it is." So then he goes back into the supervisor's office, and everybody else is watching me. They ask me a ton of questions. And "What's in your truck? Do you have anything? Do you have weapons in there?" "No, I don't have any weapons." "Do you have any drugs?" "No." "Do you have money more than $10,000? "No, I don't have that." I mean, just a raft of questions. "Is there anything sharp in your truck? Because we're going to go search your truck right now." And I says, "No." "Oh, yeah, sorry. By the way, in the pouch next to my seat, you'll find my fishing fillet knife there. Because, not that I use it as a weapon or anything. I just happen to remember that I put it there last." So I said, "Just so you know, there's a very razor-sharp knife there." "Well, what's that for?" Fishing. Filleting fish." Okay, so anyways, so they go back in the supervisor's office, and a little while later, out comes the supervisor himself. Guess what? It's a guy I know really well. He happens to be the supervisor on that border patrol at that time of the morning. And he comes out and he says, "Oh, no, Herb, it's you." And I'm like, "What do you mean? We're friends." Like, what do you mean it's me? And so he says, "We got a real problem here." And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, what's the problem? He says, "There's a federal arrest out for you, warrant arrest for you." And I thought, yeah, right. What kind of a joke is this? Nick, because that's his name. And he says, "No, seriously." I says, "What's it for what?" "Don't know. All we do is we have to exercise the warrants. So I'm going to have to do something. I said, "Well, do whatever you have to do." So he looks at one of his officers and nods like that. Guy comes over, and he's rough. He says, "Spread your legs up against this table, lean forward, put your hands on this table." And and another guy pulls a little card out, and he reads me all my rights. And he says, "We're arresting you." And then he says, "You got anything sharp in your pockets?" "No." He asks me a bunch of questions. And then he frisks me. And I mean, like, we're talking about a frisk. Wasn't fun. And so goes through all that. He says, "Okay, put your right hand behind your back." Click. On goes a handcuff. Put your left hand. Click. On goes a handcuff. And I'm like, well, this doesn't look too good right now. So then I'm saying, what is this all about? I have no idea. I don't do illegal things. Yeah, I may have gone over the speed limit once or twice at 2 a.m. or whatever, maybe more than that, but whatever. No big deal. That shouldn't get me arrested. So anyways, then they put me in a jail there at the border. Well, that wasn't fun. Not that I'm claustrophobic or anything, but it doesn't feel good to be stuck in a little cell with nothing but stainless steel in there. And it's air conditioned, so it's really cold. So I'm sitting in there, and this goes on for a couple of 3 hours. And then all of a sudden, my wife shows up, because here's what happened. I said, Nick, I got to catch a plane. He says, you got a lot bigger problems than that. And I says, well, let me phone down there and tell him that maybe I'll miss tonight's meeting, but I'll be there tomorrow morning. And he says, I don't think that's a good idea because I can't even let you make a phone call. And I says, what? And I says, well, let me phone my dad, because this guy knows my dad as well. I said, let me phone him, and he'll phone down there. I don't want to leave anybody hanging. I did. Donna was saying that you got 2 weeks before the youth camp up in North Queensland. I stiffed them, not because I wanted to, but hey, once this whole thing got going, I had no passports or anything. So anyways, so he says, you can't phone your dad. I says, well, what is this? I says, I'm smartening up to this game. I said, then you phone my dad. Well, what rule could there be that the supervisor of the border isn't allowed to phone my dad? So he thinks about it for a second. He thought, well, that's reasonable. So he phones my dad and tells him, we got a problem here. And Dad says, what? And he says, we have your son, Herb, arrested here, and he's in the jail here. And my dad says, what? So my dad phones my wife. She's in the middle of getting ready to serve a big meal for Canadian Thanksgiving where she invites usually 30, 40 parents. She gets this phone call, and my dad says, they got him. She says, who's got who? Oh, the border has Herb. So anyways, make a long story short, she just bails on her obligations there and runs down, and by the time she gets to the border, Nick, our friend, says, you got to take this truck and go home. She says, I'm not going anywhere until I see my husband. He says, you can't. Well, my wife she's liberated, but not when it comes to getting, out there with people. But she just said, I am not going, I'm going to sit right here until I can see him. He said, I can't do that. She says, what law is it to say I can't sit here? I thought my wife was doing pretty good at that point. And so he realized that, we got a feisty one here. So I don't know if it's legal or not. They let her come in. They hauled me out. I'm in handcuffs. So they haul me out. And, she says, what's this all about? I said, I don't have a clue. If I had an idea, I would, I would tell you. They don't even tell me what this is all about. So I'm talking a little bit, and she says, well, what's going to happen in your meetings? I said, tell Dad to go to my computer and look for all my here 3 times over a period of a year and a half on Friday nights. And I've been in the home of the Imam, who's the leader of 400 million Sufis around the world. And they got spies. They saw me there. Well, this should be an easy one to deal with. So that's what I'm thinking. And so then, so I'm waiting there. I do finally find out what has something to do with an environmental issue because I overheard somebody talking about it. And I thought, well, I'm a shareholder, major shareholder in a battery recycling plant in Texas. But what could that be? I was. Make a long story short, I didn't, I got out of that. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just there was something very political going on, and that's what this whole thing is about. Anyhow, so then 6 hours later, after I'm in jail there for 6 hours, 2 guys come in. They usher me out, 2 federal U.S. agents. And now they handcuff my ankles together. No, it's not handcuff, ankle cuffs, whatever they're called. So now I got my feet chained together. They put a chain around my waist with a lock on it and then chain my wrists to that. And so now I'm like the Unabomber being shuffled out to this car. And then they get me in the car and they just boot it. It's a civilian looking car, but it has a little light they can put on it. And these guys are driving insane. And I'm thinking, they can't be that good. Like, what if somebody pulls out from a side road or whatever happens and we're just barreling down, we get on the freeway, we're heading south. And by now I'm talking to these guys trying to figure out what's going on. And they realize that I'm not that bad of a guy, so they're communicating. They said, look, you're not supposed to really be talking to anybody, but you need to talk to anybody. I said, yeah, I'd like to phone my wife. So they handed me their cell phone. Well, how do you run a cell phone when your hands are down around your waist? And so I'm trying to crunch over and I dial my wife, get a hold of her. She's on her way to Seattle. She says, where are you going? I says, well, apparently I'm going to U.S. federal prison. Just not my kind of a thing, So anyways, so they transport me 3 hours south to SeaTac Federal Prison, this great, big, huge federal prison. And then I'm brought in chains, and they lock all these doors behind me, and it's like they got a big fish here or something. And so then they say, okay, take all your clothes. They take the chains off, strip. Okay, fine. So I strip. And then they do all these searches, which aren't very fun, and strip searches. So then I'm standing in front of these guys. They says, what size are you? Oh, I'm a large. They fire a piece of underwear at me. Then they says, "Oh, what's your pant size?" Well, I'm large. Okay, throw that at me, and then so they're throwing clothes at me, saying, "Get dressed." So then they stick you in another cell for 2 hours with some really rough-looking guys. They're all looking at me, and we didn't talk a whole lot in that one. Make a long story short, I go through all the photos, side view, front view, with the measure. That's all true. It's like the movies. And so then I go back into the cell. Then about a couple hours after that, they call me out. Now I have to have an interview with some guy, and he says, "Here's the way it works. This is your first conviction, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, here's the way it works. You have a right to take solitary confinement if you want." Well, he made it play out as though this is a good thing. So I thought, like, what is that? And he says, 23 hours in the cell, 1 hour out, not with anybody else, but 1 hour out of the cell, so 23 and 1. And I thought, man, if I had a Bible or something, I could probably handle this. So it sounded like it was a good offer, so I said, okay, I'll do that. I'll take solitary confinement, rather than general population, he said. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So as he's doing this interview, and I mean, it's like a million questions, and I'm thinking about this, and I figure, okay, this whole thing's so weird. I wonder if God needs me in here for some reason. I'm hating this whole ordeal, but maybe. And so I thought, but what good would I be if I'm in solitary confinement? So I'm thinking about this. So I told the guy, I said, is it too late to change my mind? And he says, about what? I says, I'll go into general population. He says, if you want to, no problem. So I thought, well, this doesn't sound too good. So anyways, that's what I want. Anyways, long story short, takes me another couple hours. Then they go to usher me into the ward that I'm going to be in with 120 guys. This is Friday night. It's my wife's birthday weekend. It's Mother's Day. Now, I wouldn't run away on my wife's birthday, so some of you ladies think that I'm really bad. They asked me. I said, no, I can't come. It's my wife's birthday, and it's Mother's Day, same weekend. And they kept saying, no, look, it's interdenominational. We have to have you come to this thing. And I says, no, it's like I'm not coming. And then finally they said, well, what would it take? I said, if you want to talk to my wife and get permission from her, okay, but that's the only way it's going to work. So they phoned her and kept pushing her till she said yes. But now it's her weekend birthday. She's at her parents' in Seattle. It's Mother's Day, and I'm in jail. So these two guys are ushering me to go up into the ward. I'm all chained up again for this ordeal, so I'm shuffling along. And we come to an elevator door, and I'm just standing there. What am I supposed to do? And the guy just screams his head off me, put your nose against the wall. Now that, oh, okay. So I'm leaning over. I got my nose against the wall. I don't know where. I just put it against the wall. We go into the elevator. I turn around, and he screams at me, and get your nose against the door. Okay, so I got my nose against the door. Just, the whole treatment is just to bust you as quick as they can. So then we come to the door to go into the ward. Now, they dressed me up in an orange suit. And I walk in, everybody's wearing tan. Now, that I do look a little bit conspicuous here. So as soon as I walk into that door, a few of the white guys, because I realized in prison how segregated this whole thing is, some white guys ran around and says, oh, man, we got to get you out of that monkey suit. We got to get you out of that monkey suit right now. We got to get... And I'm realizing, I look different than everybody else. And so they're running around trying to find used clothes for me to get me into tan. And so there I stand in bright orange, and everybody's looking at me. 120 guys. Who's this guy? And so then I says, well, what's this mean? They says, you don't know what that means? And I says, no, I've never been in jail before. They said, they're announcing that you're a newbie. In other words, you've never been to jail before. Well, that doesn't sound too good, because why would they do that? So they get me all this clothes. All they could find is extra large pants and stuff, and they don't let you have a belt or strings because you could hang yourself in prison. So I'm walking around for the next couple of days trying to hold my pants up, And then I don't have a roommate yet, so they go through all this paperwork while I stand there. Everybody just glares at you, because I'm the new guy. And so then they said they finally find a roommate for me, and they take me up to the room. And I go into this tiny room, which will be locked up several times a day. You're in there. And hardly enough room to stand with two guys. The bed is 26 inches wide, like 54 centimeters wide, of mattress that thick. And there's guys in there for years. This is a maximum security prison. And I have the top bunk, which is this high, and it's concrete floors all around, and I'm not against the wall. So if you try to roll over, you're going to fall off, hit the floor either way. They give you one toilet in the middle, no privacy, nothing else. And so they take me up call this guy, introduce me to him, and he begins to tell me the rules. I got a book. I was supposed to read this book and sign that I understand the rules. I hadn't had a chance to read it yet, and this guy begins to tell me the unwritten rules. So he starts talking about, you don't go near the blacks. This is the way they just say it. You don't go near the blacks. They're all over there. They stay there. They sit there. They're not allowed to come here. We're not allowed to go there. Then all the Hispanics, they're in the middle. You don't talk to any of those guys. And then we're over here. At breakfast and dinner, you can eat with us, but unfortunately, man, at supper, you got to eat with that black guy over there because they don't like him. So anybody that's not liked, they have to sit over at this table. So I'm like, I don't care. Like, I'm from Canada. We don't care about stuff like that, you know? And so he says, you don't go near them. Now, you know, I'm listening to all this. And he says, okay. And then he starts to give me the rules. He says, here's the deal. If somebody double crosses you, and I says, like what? He says, oh. And he says, no, quit talking. And I thought, okay. So he says, if somebody double crosses you, here's the way it works. You come to our shot caller. And I said, shot caller? What's a shot caller? He says, listen. You're not listening. And I'm thinking, okay, I guess I haven't, caught this thing yet. But he says, the shot caller, the blacks have a shot caller, the Hispanics have a shot caller, we have a shot caller, and then there's all the East Indians and the other people that are in there that have nobody to represent them. So he explains to me that they all have a shot caller, which is the head guy. So if somebody from the blacks, he's telling me, double cross you, I says, like, what do you mean? He says, quit talking. I thought, okay, I don't know what I'm expecting here. He says, then you come to our shot caller. I says, who's our shot caller? He just loses his cool on me. He says, I will tell you, but quit asking questions. Okay. So then he says, you come to our shot caller. They go to their shot caller. That guy, the guy that double-crossed you, has to come and publicly apologize. And I said, and what if he doesn't? He says, then we call out the torpedoes. And I said, and what's a torpedo? And he says, those are people that hurt people. And I said, okay, I'm getting this. And anyways, make a long story short, my roommate happened to be the shot caller for the whites. I say it brashly because that's exactly the way they're saying it. And they're a lot more rougher than that. But anyhow, so he goes and leaves me in my room. And I go lay up in the top bed. And I'm looking up at the ceiling, and I'm looking at the little bubbles in the concrete and the multiple layers of paint. And I'm looking at the tiny little window that goes out the door. So when it is locked, you can just see light coming through there. And I got to be honest, I lost it. I just started crying like a baby. I couldn't believe what was going on. And so I got myself together, and I thought, what are you doing? I mean, like, you just thought a minute ago that maybe God needs you here for some reason. I have to have that, otherwise I'd be losing it. So I got my composure, got up, and I decided I'm going to be walking around. It's a triangle shape. Each ward is triangle shape, and I'm walking around on the second floor, 60 rooms in there. And so... And I just have to burn up this anxiety I have. So I'm walking. I get to one end, and I stoop down. I start to do some push-ups, because I'm just wound up. I have to unwind. And some guy comes running over. He says, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just doing some push-ups. He says, you're not allowed to. And I said, why? And he says, they don't want anybody to have upper body strength, so you're not allowed to do any exercises like that. And I thought, okay. And so I keep walking. As I'm walking, I would go through phases of being bold and then just not lose it there, but I mean just like I could hardly stand this. So at one point I stop and I put my hands on the railing. Another guy runs over. He says, what are you doing? And I says, looking down here, he says, no, you can't touch the railing. And the guards, they lop out. So they got all these rules to try to get you. And so okay. So I back up. So I'm standing there. I'm looking at all these guys. And I'm not supposed to look at the other groups. But I'm looking at them, and I'm just thought, you know what? What am I doing here? This whole thing is so insane that that it must be a God thing. So if it's a God thing, I got to be in here for a reason. So I got bold all of a sudden. And so I started praying under my breath, like I like to audibly pray. I'm not going to pray out loud. So I start praying, and I look at all these guys, and I say, okay, Satan, if you think you're going to take me down, you got another thing coming. There's no way. I said, you're going to lose this battle, because before the universe right now, I call down the power and the presence of the Holy Spirit. I call down holy angels for these guys here. And I pray, God, that you'll make me bold in this place. And so I'm just praying like crazy. My gut's not feeling really good. Go back to my room, lose it. And so then they have a library there. I have nothing to read. So I'm down in the library of just sticky body oil books there. Like, these are old, and And I'm going through all these novels and stuff, and I find this one book, no cover on it, and I'm looking through it. It's a Bible. Now, so I go back up in my room and I start reading the book of Acts, and I get to the story where Peter's in jail and the doors open. I thought, wouldn't that be a cool one? I say, okay, God, I'm ready for this one. Make a long story short, I'm in there 5 days. I'm strip searched 5 times during that time. So first Friday night, I said, can you make a phone call out of here? Yeah, you're allowed 10, 15-minute phone calls a month, but you have to have an account, and somebody from the outside has to put money in your account, and you have to get a special number to even access the telephone in jail. And all the signs that says, whatever you say will be held against you. And at the telephone it says, no whispering, no innuendo, it will be used against you. So that's all this rules in there. So I go down to the guard station and I say, how do I get one of them numbers? And the guy said, you can't get one of them until Monday. And I thought, how am I going to get through? My wife doesn't know where I'm at, what's going on. And I'm just like traumatized because I know she's going to be traumatized. So a little while later, there's a woman guard, but she's locked in to the jailhouse, whatever. So I go up to the window with all the bars and I say, excuse me, ma'am, is there any way of getting one of these numbers, whatever it is, before Monday? She said, because I said, I got a bit of a dilemma. I need to at least phone a lawyer or whatever. I didn't know that my brother got right on it and got me, 2 high-profile lawyers in Seattle right off the bat. I didn't know that stuff was going on. So I said, I at least minimum have to phone a lawyer. And she says, no, you're going to have to wait till Monday. I says, yeah, but what about the situation where I need to phone? She says, can I make a suggestion? And I said, yeah, sure. She says, don't come to jail. And I walked away. So I tell this other guy, so I'm walking around, and he says, what was that all about? And I said, well, she just really snipped me off really bad. He says, oh, really? So he's in for 10 more years, and he doesn't much care. He goes down there and just lambastes her for being such a whatever, and so he was down there just going at her. And so I'm listening to all this thing, and I thought, now I'm going to really be in trouble. So anyways, so I go to bed that night. I don't sleep one wink. How can I? I can't even roll over. I'm just sitting there with my arms crossed. My wife even brings this up. For a month after I was out of this situation, I would sleep with my arms crossed, just because I'm just stressed out, for one thing. And so anyways, next day, Sabbath, what am I going to do? I get up, have myself another cry. I'm a tough guy, I said, well, give me Valium, anything right now is what I was thinking at times, because I can't handle this. Then I get all tough. So I thought, okay, today I've got to be bold. So I start walking around and meet this one guy, the guy that screamed at the guard woman the night before. So I say, thanks a lot, And he says, oh, yeah, no problem. No, they can't get away with that kind of stuff. Oh, he says, that just burns me in. So he says, what are you in for? I hardly know. But my shot caller said that you have to tell them what you're in for and don't lie about it because they'll find out. So I saw, yeah, supposedly an environmental infraction. Oh, so you're a big cat, huh? Whatever, you go out and wreck the environment. And I says, no, because I hadn't done anything wrong. It's just that something happened and they wanted me to turn evidence and I refused to turn it. So they just simply hacked me with all these charges to try to get me to talk. So anyhow, so I start talking a little bit and I says, what are you in for? Income tax fraud? How long you been in here? Well, I've already been in 10 years. I said, how much more? 10 more years. I said, how do you get 10 years? How do you get 20 years for income tax fraud? He says, well, I got 5 years to start with. Then I broke out of jail, and I got recaught, so that added another 5. And so then he says, well, I forgot what else. He's telling me his whole story. He got another 10 years on top of that. So for an income tax, what started as income tax fraud with kids and everything at home, he's got 20 years. Anyway, so I said, oh, man, how do you take it? And he says, it's to the point where you're so numb, you just can't think about time. You can't think about anything. You can't let your mind do anything. And I said, you know what? And I'll start to feel bold. And I says, well, you know what? You can be completely free while you're in here. And he says, what do you mean? And I says, well, if you give yourself over to God, I said, that's what I did. I said, my life wasn't always very, very good, and I shared my whole testimony with the guy sitting in his room because he invited me into his room. And I thought, I don't know if I want to go in someone's room, but I did. And so I'm sharing this all with him, my testimony. And the guy, tough guy like him, begins to puddle up. And he's just listening to this whole story. And he says, wow, did I ever need that? He says, would you ever pray for me? And I says, absolutely. So I pray for this guy. Well, in jail, in a ward of 120 guys, it doesn't take long. And all of a sudden, this other guy, like 10 minutes after I leave his room, this other guy comes up, oh, you're a Christian. I said, yeah. He says, come on over. I want to talk to you. So I look in his room, and I thought, I don't know if I want to go in this room or not, you know. So I go into the room, and he says, I'm a Mormon. And he says, what are you in for again? Told him. What are you in for? His was, I forgot what it was, racketeering. That's what his was. So anyways, so he's telling me that he's a Mormon, and so we get chatting, and I wind up praying for him. And now I'm feeling really good. I figure this is what God wants me in here for. So I go walk, because that's all you can do in there. And I'm looking to, kind of glancing into some of the rooms. There's this poor East Indian guy in there. He's got no shot collars for him. He's got no support. So about the 10th time I'm walking around, I just tapped on his door. He says, how you doing? And he says, terrible. And I says, so how long you in for? 5.5 years. I says, like, what happened to you? And he says, I got a family of 4 kids. We moved over to this country. And he says, I can barely make it driving a truck. And so he says, somebody offered me $25,000 if I would take a package across the border. And I got caught. And I got all this time now. And I says, well, when did it start? Just started. And he says, I can't believe it. I got a family out there that has no support system, and I'm in here. And I says, oh, man. So I'm visiting with him for a while, and he's starting to feel better. And before I leave, I have prayer with him. So this starts to go around. And then this black guy comes up to me. I'm not supposed to talk amongst each other. And I'm like looking around, well, what if he approaches me? I'm okay with this, but what if he approaches me? So he comes up, and he's pretty harsh. But he says, so what you in for? I hear you're some fat cat, some rich guy who goes around wrecks the environment. And I'm thinking, no, but I can't really argue. So we have a chat for a while, and so he says, yeah, I hear you're Christian. Yeah, I am. And I didn't have prayer with him, but we talked about it a little bit. Make a long story short, I thought my day was going not too bad. And then my brother, one of the lawyers he hires, comes in to visit me. Well, that was kind of not a bad idea because I got to leave the ward anyways, but they chained me all up. I go down, but when they take me out of the ward, before they chain me up, strip search. Like, I mean, what contraband or whatever can I get inside my jail cell that I could possibly take out? And so I go through this strip search, go out, meet the lawyer, and he's somewhat assuring, but at the same time he says, I'm going to let you know right up front that all federal cases filed by the federal government of the United States, 96% are won by them, whether it's legit or not. So he says, we're up against the wall here. Make a long story short, he leaves. I get strip searched again before I go back in case he would have given me something. I don't know what that was all about. Go back in and waiting, and it's the waiting game. Sunday comes, horrible, but I'm talking to people. Monday morning comes, and the guard comes to me and says, you're going to court today. And I'm hoping to get a bail hearing. In other words, I can be out. So I haven't seen my family, nothing. Oh, I was able to get a hold of my wife on Sabbath. Finally, miracle of all miracles, one guard comes up and says, we're able to get you a number, which wasn't supposed to get till Monday. So I got this number. I phoned my wife, collect call at her parents' place. They said, oh, this is federal, CTAC, federal prison, blah, blah, blah. Of course, my wife accepts the charges, thankfully. Anyways, so I get on the phone. I have 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That's all I have. And so I'm ready to talk, and all of a sudden my voice goes on me because I'm ready to cry. I just like this whole thing is I hear her voice and I just go, hello. My wife's, are you okay? Are you okay? Yeah. And so she says, like, are you seriously? Are you okay? Can you talk? And I says, yeah. The whole 10 minutes, no phone. I couldn't talk. So I wait, get my composure again. I phone back about 20 minutes later. I'm using up my monthly quota really fast here. And I got it all together again. Hi. Hello. Anyways, I finally did get a chat. I think it was the 3rd phone call. And I said, no, I'm okay. Anyways, so Monday morning I have to go to court. So it's a big ordeal. They chain you all up. They take you downstairs. They put you in a holding tank with a bunch of other guys that are going for court for various things as well. Some of these guys are murderers, whatever. And these are tough-looking guys. So we're all stuck in this room, about a dozen of us, and nobody talks. And these guys are rough-looking, and they have a toilet in the middle of the room. It's all about humility. And there's no barrier or anything, and there's video cameras everywhere, and there's warning things, and there's people right on the side. So-and-so's a snitch. So in other words, somebody faint on someone else. So now they're telling the rest of the prisoners, if you run into this guy, do him in, whatever. So I'm sitting there and nobody's talking. And I'm intimidated too. And so finally I said, any of you guys praying guys? And this young black guy puts his hand, I am. Then an older black guy puts his hand up, I am. And I said, would anybody here mind if I pray for all of us? And they said, no, go for it if you want. So I pray my guts. I have to admit, I was peeking with one eye. As I said, you never know what happens in a place like that if somebody didn't like what I was doing. So I'm praying my guts out for everybody there. And when I'm finished, the young black guy, so I'm going to pray next. So he prays. So we're having a prayer meeting in prison now. And so then the other older black guy, he prays. And then all of a sudden, we all start to talk. Just opened it up. So then we all get loaded in the bus, all chained up, and it's nice and warm in front. And then they put the air conditioner on the back. That's just part of the strategy. They freeze you out, so when your nerves are on edge anyways, you're just shaking like crazy because it's ice cold, and they don't give you warm enough clothes. So you're always just on the edge. You're just shivering. So we go down, drive all the way in. We're driving by all these cars. They're looking up. Oh, yeah, look at all the bars. Because I used to say, scumbags. Not really, but, now I'm one of them. So we get down to court. Throw you in another jail down there. It's all stainless steel. No privacy at the bathroom. I sit down. There's one other guy in there. He's 21 years old. He's an East Indian kid. And he's just terrified. And so I said, where are you from? Abbotsford, British Columbia. My town. What are the odds? So I said, oh, man, what happened to you? Well, my friends, I rented a car. We're horsing around up there, rented a car. And then my friends were all driving a thing as well, and he says then they went across the border, grabbed a bag of cocaine, came back, got caught by the U.S. side before they got into Canada because it was a sting, and here I am. I said, so what are they looking at? 4.5 years. And I said, man, I'll bet you right now you're feeling like the 4.5 years you spend in here is going to put you so far behind in life that all your friends, when you get out, will be married, they'll be wealthy, they'll have good jobs, everything. He says, yeah. And I said, well, let me tell you the way it works. And I sat down, and the story of Joseph in the Bible is pretty short, if you just read it. I spent an hour and a half telling him the story of Joseph, just embellishing it as much as I could, not adding stuff that's not imperative, but I made it very, very understandable. Meanwhile, halfway through this story, in walks this really tough guy. He's just built, and he walks in, and there's one roll of toilet paper in the room. And everybody wants that so they can put their head down on something. So he walks over to the young East Indian kid. He had it. He just grabs it, rips it out of his hand, walks over there, lays down on the same bench I'm on, lays down, puts his head on the toilet paper, and then he'd look up and just, disgusted. I'm talking about the spiritual stuff. So I continue, tell him the whole story, and I said, but here's what's cool. This Joseph guy gave himself to God in prison. And when he came out, he didn't have to do anything to catch up. God made him the number 2 most powerful guy in the world at the time, certainly to the Pharaoh. And I said, so when you come out of here, if you give yourself to God, who knows where you're going to wind up? You'll be way ahead of your friends. And he just lit up like crazy. I said, would you mind if we prayed for each other? He says, this is after a long time. So now this guy in the end, he'd keep looking up at me, like trying to give me the hint to shut up. And I wasn't. And so I said, I prayed for him, got his name, prayed for him, and then I said, I'd really appreciate your praise too. And I'll pray for you. And he folds his hands like this, pointed up, and starts speaking in Punjabi. I don't know what he's saying, but 2 times in the prayer I heard my name. It gave me comfort there in prison. I finish this mutual prayer. We finish this mutual prayer. This guy in the end sits up, doesn't look at me. He's just looking ahead. He says, you know what? He says, I can't remember what it was, like 3 or 4 years ago, my sister bought me the Purpose-Driven book. What an idiot I am. If I would have read that book, I wouldn't be here I am today. And he starts to say, I've got 2 little kids and a wife. And here I am. I got sucked into this. And here I am on drug charges. And you know what I'm doing today? I'm turning evidence on my friend to try to buy myself a shorter time. What kind of a scumbag am I? And so here I am with this guy, and I pray with him. Go into court. The lawyers that my brother got, 2 of them, they said, we've talked to the judge. The judge doesn't want to let you go. So he says, we don't want her to make the decision that you can't go, because if she says no and now you got to come back and try to undo that decision, it's more difficult. So we're just going to leave. And I said, well, when can I get another hearing? He said, I don't know, it could be 2 weeks or something like that. And I just went back totally devastated. Go through another night, spending more time praying with people. Now I'm praying at night with my own roommate, and he's really happy about this, praying for his family. And so then I get Monday morning. Or it's Tuesday morning, I'm sorry. I get another knock on the door because our cell was still locked. Guy says, you're going to court today. Make a long story short, the night before they had phoned my wife. The courts had phoned my wife and talked to her for 45 minutes, asking her everything about my business and do you have offshore accounts and all this stuff. I'm making this story short and it's probably too long. But anyhow, so what happens is they ask, this court reporter, whatever she is asking my wife all these questions. And she finally gets down to the end of the conversation. And my wife says, what are you going to do? Why can't you let him go? And she says, no, you know what? My recommendation is that we let him go. At a minimum, we got to get him out of there because he's going to convert the whole prison. And I thought, oh, am I glad I opened my mouth. They see everything. They hear everything. So anyways, I don't know this information, though. So now I'm downstairs in the jail in the courthouse again, waiting my turn, which is all day, freezing in the air conditioning. Finally, go upstairs. There's my whole family sitting there. I didn't know what they all had to go through. They had to raise $150,000 really quick. And, I couldn't borrow the money. Why? Because they had filed a $17 million lawsuit against me first without even letting me know there is such a thing. So I don't show up for court. They get an automatic judgment. And the rules in the states are if you have a civil suit against you and there's a criminal suit attached, you can't remove the civil suit until a criminal. So by tying all my assets up with this automatic judgment, which I never even knew about, I couldn't defend myself in court. So my dad had to raise money. They get all that wire down. Big miracle. Should have never got there in time. One of the lawyers comes in while I'm in the courtroom and says, I can't believe it. The money's here, $150,000, because that's just if we have to offer a bail amount. Anyways, so it's my turn now. The day before I'd left, went back to jail. Now I'm here. I'm in front of the judge. And the judge begins to speak. And 2 prosecutors had flown up from Texas, state of Texas, where all this was going on. And they just stood up and they says, Your Honor, you can't let this guy go. He's from Canada. He's a risk to flight. He's got his passport is full. He's been all over the world multiple times. He's got a haven everywhere he wants to go. You can't let him go. And she says, sit down. I'm making the decision. So she says, I've done my own research on you, plus our court trustees or whatever they are have done their own research. She says, I have no reason to believe you'd ever run from this. And then the prosecutors stand up again. She says, sit down. I'm making the decision. So she says, here's my deal. I'm going to let you go on your own recognizance. So I'm like, she says, do you understand what that means? And I said, not exactly. And she says, that means I'm not requiring bail money. I'm not requiring that you be under house arrest in your parents-in-law house, which my parents-in-law had assigned to have their son-in-law spend the next 2.5 years with them, where I can't leave their house. That was pretty nice of them. My mother-in-law assigned anyways. But anyhow, Freudian, just one of those jokes. Anyways, so... This isn't recorded, is it? No. So anyhow, so the woman lets me go, but I still have to go back to jail, which is really hard. So I'm in jail for 5 days. I go back to jail, and they're going to let me out that night. So my parents, everybody comes, and they we have a minivan we call, what is it called? A mommy van that we keep around, when people come, pack a lot of people. So my wife brought that down, and my parents came down, and everybody. So the mommy van is plugged with people, and they come to the jailhouse. And I get checked out. Meanwhile, my cell phone's been taken apart. My watch has been taken apart. And our lawyer says, ditch the cell phone, ditch the watch. They know how to tap this stuff and everything else. And so anyhow, so we go out. So I finally get to come out. I'm out of the jail, and wow, it was just like awesome. So I see the mommy van out there, and I'm just tripping out there. And my dad gets out with the camera. He says, oh, no. Go back there. I want to get pictures of this. And I'm thinking, who wants pictures of me getting out of federal prison? I mean, what is your problem? No, and so he takes a picture. Oh, no, stay there. Let me get this angle here. And I'm like, oh, for crying out loud, if anybody's up there looking out, they're going to think, if I ever come back, they'll remember me. Anyways. So I go home. But the point is I spent 2.5 years waiting for my trial for something I did not do. And when it comes, I mentioned it the other night, counterfeit guilt. When you're accused and your indictment says Herb Larsen versus the United States of America, I want to tell you it's intimidating. And for 2.5 years, I got to tell you, I oscillated like a yo-yo being down and then feeling strong. But here's the thing. The reason I'm telling you this story is because the charges that they put together trumped, total 27 years in jail. And at one hearing that I went to, I said, excuse me, how does this work? I could rape a woman and get 2 years. I can murder someone and get 7 years. I do nothing wrong and I get 27 years. What's with this? Because it was an attempt to force me to turn evidence on. Well, I'm not allowed to speak about what it is. Okay, but it just completely trumped up cards. So when you finally get down to, long story short, when you're laying awake and you're thinking that every freedom you ever thought you had is going to be taken away and you will spend the rest of your days, 27 years added to my age, I'll be dying in prison. It is daunting. And there'd be many times I'd get up with gut rot, the adrenaline would flow on me for weeks on end. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. just wound. And I'd get up and I'd go upstairs and I'd sit down in the living room and that wasn't good enough. So I'm walking around the house trying to just burn off this adrenaline rush. And then I'd go to my computer some nights. It's like God just said, go to your computer. And I would type in onto my emails. And here's a dozen emails from all over the world. Lots here from Australia. I got such support here. Unbelievable. And it'd be like, we've got our entire church fasting and praying for you. Our whole youth group is praying for you. We have 1,000 people in our social network chain praying for you right now. And they get stuff from France and all over the place. I would bawl like a baby because here I am. I'm feeling, where are you, God? The very thing he said on Calvary, where are you, was my cry. I'd say, where are you, God? And just when I was just ready to crack, I'd get these things. God was always there just to give me enough to get through it all. I'm on my way down to my trial. My wife's with me. We've discussed a lot of this, what assets to sell and everything else so she could buy another place in Texas if I happen to go to jail. Meanwhile, I get the #1 criminal defense attorney in all of Texas and one of the most known attorneys in the whole United States. All the billionaires, whenever they're in trouble, Dick DeGuerin is his name. When we'd go into court, the first time the prosecutor saw him, she knew she was done. And she was just elected to be the next district attorney. Big honor. By the time the case was done, it was all stripped from her, and the other 2 prosecuting attorneys that were brought in were defrocked because they failed so miserably on a case that was all made up in the first place. So anyways, make a long story short, the judge was on my side. He's an 80-year-old guy who came out of retirement, most seasoned federal judge, comes out of retirement, and I thought, how can you possibly be this one-sided for me? Because the prosecutors would bring something up. He says, no, sit down. And it's like, that looks so bad that they must think that I have the judge in my pocket, and everybody's praying for me. Shut the mouths of the lions. And the prosecutors did not, I forgot what the thing is, but they file a form to say that this guy is biased to get him off the seat. Never did do that. So we're on our way down for my trial, and they wanted to book 6 weeks for the trial. They spent $1.5 million on the case. They had 32 professional witnesses hired. They had 3 prosecutors by now. They have 14 Environmental Protection Agency agents. They have 2 criminal agents, or whatever, what do they call it? Criminal investigators, I guess it is. So they have all this stuff together. I'm in Denver, Colorado on my way down with my wife, and we get a phone call in my cell. It's my lawyer. He says, yeah, like I figured, they want to drop the charges. And I'm like, wow. So he says, so you have to still come down here and you have to go through all this stuff. So we get down there, and so they just wanted to drop the charges. But here's what happened. They hit the president of our company so hard right up front. They said, if you plead to 1 felony, we will promise you no prison time. So he pleads right off the bat. No prison time, I'll take the felony. They go to our operations manager, tell her, if you plead, she didn't want to hang in her because I had the dream team lawyers. And so she's hanging with me, but 3 weeks before she capitulates and says, I will take a felony in terms for exchange for no prison time. So what they did, they never did charge me with anything except I conspired, because once they have one person already criminally negligent to something that didn't happen, then they say, I'm conspiring because he's already charged and already convicted, So anyways, make a long story short, we get in there, and my lawyer says right away, I want you to drop the charges on, they aren't even his clients. But because he saw what was all about. Everybody was seeing this. Even the judge saw what this was all about, trying to get me to talk. And so then, which I refused to do. So anyway, my lawyer tells the courts, prosecutors, you drop the felony charges and reduce them to misdemeanors or else. They said, we can't do that. So a bunch of negotiations. So finally they came to me. They said, look, my lawyer says, I don't want to see them win anything. So he says, here's what I've discussed. Would you be willing to take the lowest level misdemeanor, 13 levels, you take the lowest level misdemeanor in exchange for them reducing felonies to misdemeanors on those two people? So he says, what we've done is we've obliterated them so bad that they'll probably never work again. And I'm saying, whatever, what do you think? He says, I will make sure this will never bother you. So to save the other two's bacon, I took the lowest level misdemeanor. So then we're in court. That was the only part of it that was plea bargain on my part, whatever. So we go into court, and the judge was furious when he heard that I took a misdemeanor, even the lowest level, because he says, this man has done nothing wrong. Once before, when I had no passports, couldn't travel, I had to drop your guys' youth thing up there. 13 countries of the world had to drop speaking. And so finally I told my lawyer, I says, why can't I have my passports back? I mean, I'm going to the parole people every week and, sitting with all the other not the other ones, but sitting with twitching drug addicts stuff. Were you good this week? Did you follow your terms? Did you get rid of your guns? Yeah, all that. Sign this thing. So anyways, we get down to the very end of this thing, and the judge was furious that I took even a misdemeanor. But in our negotiations, we didn't talk about probation for me or anything like that. So then the prosecutors jump up, Your Honor, we did not negotiate probation. We want probation for this man. We want him to be going to parole off, not parole because I didn't have jail, but whatever. It's I have to go in once a month and check in and all that, and have all these conditions. And so the prosecutors jumped up and said they wanted me to have this. The judge says, no, I'm not giving you that. And they said, yes, Your Honor. And so they brought up some previous case, and so he thought, okay, fine. Tell you what, I'll give him a year. He says, but here's my terms. So he turns to me and he says, here's my terms, Mr. Larsen. He says, can you be good for a year? And I says, yeah, I kind of thought I was most of my life. And he says, good, that's my terms. Be good for a year and it's all over with. And so then the prosecutors jumped up again. He says, no, sit down. I've made my decision. He says, furthermore, go get your guns. You can have your guns back. He says, you've got your passport. You continue traveling. Hey, be good for a year. We don't even know what happened. But during that time, the thing I learned the most is when I'm down and beat up, which I've been beat up lots of times in my life, I always know at the end of it all, I can look back and say, it was good for me. And so during this time, I'm looking ahead. God's there. He's showing all these things. One of the things is $150,000. Now my parents can't borrow any money against their assets, and my assets are all tied up, so I can't borrow a dime to support myself. So I'm out of money. I gave $150,000 that was going to go to parole or to bail. They didn't need, so I sent that. That was my down payment, the retainer for the lawyer. And then now I'm up to I need another $100,000. And I can't borrow it. The bank says, sorry, all your assets are tied up by the U.S. government. And your parents, they don't have enough income to justify it, and we can't use your income to justify their loan. So anyways, make a long story short, I was hooped. So I'm down and out, and I get a phone call. Russell was one of the guys working on this heavily. Make a long story short, when I'm down and out and the lawyer's putting the pressure on me, I get a phone call, and Russell's phoning me and a couple other guys down here in Victoria. Some bunch of business guys down, you put $100,000 together and forward it to me. And when I said, what terms do you want to pay back? There are no terms. You're on the battlefield. This is exactly what they said. You're on the battlefield. You got shot, you're wounded. We're on the same battlefield, but we're not frontline people. So we got to get you healthy and get you back out there. So forget about it. What you've done for our lives in terms of your own ministry is enough. Forget about it. We don't want to see a dime of it back. That's just the God thing. But when I look back on an experience like that and many other ones that I've had in my life, not like that one, but I ask myself this, would I ever want to go through that again? No, not a chance. But if it was asked this way, would I go through it again based on what I gained? I don't like my answer, but I would say yes, I would do it again. Why? Because when you're down and out like that and you just hang in there, God always, no matter what the trouble is you're having, God always gives you just that little edge to get through, just that little edge to get through. When it's all done, you can look back and realize God was there the whole time, like that poem, Footprints, or whatever it's called, in the sand. You know, God's there carrying you when it's the lowest. And I mean, Scripture, Isaiah 41:10, Psalms 35, Psalms 91, all those things. I lived on those. I would recite those all night for 2.5 years. And so when I come out of the whole thing, I realize, you know what? God will use this experience sometime. Okay, I got to witness in prison. But at the same time, and one last little thought here. When I was starting the Bible studies on the street, you cannot get in with these people. They're paranoid of anybody because they've been burned by everybody in society. And my very first night in that bus with all these street people, out of my mouth, which was just was over, out of my mouth says, like when I was in jail. And I thought, what did I just say that for? I can't believe that just came out of my mouth. But guess what? It opened the whole bus up. Oh, I spent 17 years. Oh, I had 7 years. Oh, I've been in and out of jail my whole life, and blah, blah, blah. In one statement, never looked back. Those people trusted me. They wanted to hear everything I had to say about the Bible, and we're close friends now. So I've realized, and I've used it in other places. It's one of those little experiences that God's already used, and I know in the future He's going to use. The bottom line is this. When tough times come, and it seems like there is no God, and you're crying out, my God, where are you? Remember, when Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? That is your very cry going to heaven by Jesus. So when bad things come, know and understand that Jesus is walking with you, and God is there. And the emptier it seems, and the more unattached you feel from God, in the future you'll recognize those were the times where He is probably the closest. And I just wanted to bring that story up for encouragement if some of you are going through tough times, or I know you will go through tough times in the future, because that's life. Never forget that God is there.